JMeter Architecture. Here you can see working process. Apache JMeter is an Apache project that can be used as a load testing tool for analyzing and measuring the performance of a variety of services with the focus on web applications. Now we are focusing on user requests for server connection. User requests for server connection. Here you can see thread group. A thread group defines a pool of users that will execute a particular test case against your server. In the thread group GUI, you can control the number of users simulated, a number of threads, the ramp up time, how long it takes to start all the threads, the number of times to perform the test, and optionally a start and stop time for the test. Here you can see the thread group here. The thread group is connected to server. One user simulates one user request is passed from thread group to server. 20 user simulates 20 user requests is passed from thread group to server. 50 user simulates 50 user requests is passed from thread group to server. 100 user simulates 100 user requests is passed from thread group to server. As an example, we can consider this. This is a screenshot of control panel of HTTP request. The sampler HTTP request. The sampler lets you send an HTTP or HTTPS request to a web server. It also lets you to control whether or not JMeter passes HTML files or for images and other embedded resources and sends HTTP request to retrieve them. Following type of embedded resources are retrieved: images, applets, style sheets, CSS, and resources reference from those files, external scripts, frames, iframes, background images, body, table, TD, and TR, background sound. Here you can see name parameter. This is a descriptive name for this sampler that is shown in the tree. Server, the domain name or IP address of the web server, for example www.example.com. Do not include the HTTP :// prefix. Note, if the host header is defined in the header manager, then this will be used as the virtual host name. Server name is required unless it is provided by HTTP request defaults or a full URL including name, host, and port. Scheme : / host : port is set in path field. Port the web server is listening to default 80. Connection timeout, number of milliseconds to wait for a connection to open. Response timeout, number of milliseconds to wait for a response. Note that this applies to each wait for a response. If the server response is set in several chunks, the overall elapsed time may be longer than the timeout. A duration assertion can be used to detect responses that take too long to complete. In the under HTTP request, the implementation Java or HTTP for client 4, if not specified and not defined by HTTP request defaults, the default depends on the value of the JMeter property jmeter.http sampler. Failing that, the HTTP4 implementation is used. Protocol HTTP, HTTPS or file, default is HTTP. Method get, post, head, trace, options, put, delete, patch, not supported for Java implementation. With HTTP4, the following methods related to WebDev are also allowed: copy, lock, mkcol, move, prop find, prop patch, unlock, report, mkcalendar, search. More methods can be predefined for the HTTP4 by using JMeter property HTTP sampler.user_define_methods. Content encoding to be used for post, put, patch, and file. This is the character encoding to be used and is not related to the content encoding HTTP header. Path. The path to resource, for example, /servlets/my-servlet. If the resource required query string parameters, add them below in the send parameters with the request section. As a special case, if the path start with HTTP:// or HTTPS://, then this is used as the full URL. And in this case, the server port and protocol fields are ignored. Parameters are also ignored for get and delete. Methods. Also, please note that the path is not encoded apart from replaces spaces with %20. So unsafe characters may need to be encoded to avoid errors such as URI syntax exception. Here you can see the server proxy. Hostname or IP address of a proxy server to perform request. Do not include HTTP:// prefix. Port the proxy server is listening. Username, optional username for proxy server. Password, optional password for proxy server. Not this. This is stored encrypted in the test plan. Redirect automatically sets the underlying HTTP protocol handler to automatically follow redirects, so they are not seen by JMeter, and thus will not appear as samples, should only be used for get and get and head requests. The HTTP sampler will reject attempts to use for post and put. Warning, see, you can also see information on cookie and header handling. Follow redirects. This only has any effect if redirect automatically is not enabled. If set, the JMeter sampler will check if the response is a redirect and follow it if we saw. The initial redirect and further responses will appear as additional samples. The URL and data fields of the parent sample will be taken from the final non-redirected sample, but the parent bytes count and elapsed time include all samples. The latency is taken from initial response. Note that HTTP client sampler may log the following message: redirect requested, but follow redirects is disabled. This can be ignored. JMeter will collapse paths of the form / then / path segment / segment in both absolute and relative redirect URLs. For example, HTTP : / hostname /1 / path segment /2 will be collapsed into HTTP : / host /2. If necessary, this behavior can be suppressed by setting the JMeter property HTTP sampler .redirect removes last ... equal false. Keep alive. JMeter sets the connection keep alive header. This does not work properly with the default HTTP implementation, as connection reuse is not under user control. It does work with Apache HTTP components, HTTP client implementations. Use multipath for mdata for HTTP post. Use multipath for /form data or application / www form URL encoded post requests. Browser compatible headers. When using multipath for /form data, this suppresses the content type and content transfer encoding headers. Only the content disposition header is sent. Send parameters with request. The query string will be generated from the list of parameters you provide. Each parameter has name and value. The options to encode the parameter and an option to include or exclude the equal sign. Some applications don't expect an equal sign where the value is the empty string. The query string will be generated in the correct fashion depending on the choice of method you made. If you choose get or delete, the query string will append to the URL. If post and put, if post or put, then it will be sent separately. Also, if you are sending a file using multipath form, the query string will be created using the multipath form specification. Additionally, you can specify whether each parameter should be URL encoded If you are not sure what this means, it is probably the best to select it. If your values contain characters such as following, then encoding is usually required. ASCII control characters, non-ASCII characters, reserved characters. URLs use some characters for special use in defining their syntax. When these characters are not used in their special role inside URL, they need to be encoded. Example, $, ampersand, plus, comma, /, colon, semicolon, equal, question sign, ampersand, sign. Unsafe characters. Some characters present the possibility of being misunderstood within URLs for various reasons. These characters should also always be encoded. Example, space, less than, greater than, hash, percentage, etc. Here in the you can see the HTTP request control panel. You can see name and commands. Here you can there are you can see basic and advanced. Under web server you can provide details for server name or IP and port number. Under timeout you can specify connect and response in milliseconds. Under HTTP request you can specify implementation protocol, which is default to HTTP, and method and content encoding. And also you can specify path, and you can see the options for redirect automatically, follow redirects, use keep alive, use multipart, form data for post, and browser compatible headers, and you can see parameters, body data, and files upload. Under send parameter with the request you can see name, value, and encode and include equals, and here you can also see details, add from clipboard, delete, up and down. Under proxy server you can specify server name, IP, port number, username, and password. Here you can see a screenshot of control panel of thread group. A thread group defines a pool of users that will execute a particular test case against your server. In the thread group GUI, you can control the number of users simulated, number of threads, the ramp up time, how long it takes to start all the threads, the number of times to perform the test, and optionally start and stop time for the test. Here you can see these parameters, and this is name attribute, descriptive name for this element that is shown in the tree, and action to be taken after a sampler error determines what happens if a sampler error occurs, either because the sample itself failed or an assertion failed. The possible choices are continue, ignores the error and continue with the test. Start next thread loop, ignore the error, start next loop and continue with the test. Stop thread, current thread exits. Stop test. The entire test is stopped at the end of any current samples. Stop test now. The entire test is stopped abruptly. Any current samples are interrupted if possible. Number of threads, number of users to simulate, this is required, this parameter is required. Ramp up period, how long JMeter should take to get all the threads started. If there are 10 threads and ramp up time of 100 seconds, then each thread will begin 10 seconds after previous thread started, for a total time of 100 seconds to get the test fully up to speed. First thread will always start directly, so if you configured one thread, ramp up time is effectively 0. For the same reason, 10th thread in this example will actually be started after 90 seconds and will and not 100 seconds. The example is actually not shown here. We have to consider the situation we discussed before, that if there are 10 threads and ramp up time is of 100 seconds, then each thread will begin 10 seconds after the previous thread started. That was the example we are talking about. And here you can see loop count, number of times to perform the test case, alternatively infinite, can be selected, causing the test to run until manually stopped or end of the thread lifetime is reached. This number of thread is a required parameter, and ramp up time, ramp up period is also a required parameter. This loop count also is also required unless infinite is selected. Here delay thread creation until needed. If selected, threads are created only when the appropriate proportion of the ramp up time has elapsed. This is most appropriate for tests with a ramp up time that is significantly longer than the time to execute a single thread. That is where earlier threads finish before later ones start. If not selected, all threads are created when the test starts. They then pause for the appropriate proportion of the ramp up time. This is the original default and is appropriate for tests where threads are active throughout most of the test. Specify thread lifetime. If selected, confines thread operation time to the given bounds. These two parameters are also required parameters. Duration in seconds. If the scheduler checkbox is selected, one can choose retrieve end time. JMeter will use this to calculate the end time. Startup delay. If the scheduler checkbox is selected, one can choose a relative startup delay. JMeter will use this to calculate the start time. Here you can see the screenshot of the control panel of thread group. Here you can see your name and comments. Under action to be taken after a sampler error, you can select continue, startup, next thread loop, stop thread, stop thread, and stop test, or stop test now. Under thread properties, you can specify number of threads, users, ramp up time period in seconds, loop count, and you can also select infinite here, and you can also select a sample user on each iteration, delay thread creation until needed, and specify thread lifetime. And you can also see duration in seconds and startup delay in seconds here. As an exception example, we can consider this one, response code, non-HTTP response code, org.apache.http.conn.http host connection exception, response message, non-HTTP response message connect to proxy.usb.com:8080 proxy.usb.com/91.195.240.126 failed, connection timeout, connect. As an error example, we can consider this one. Error requests are not logged in the server for load test in JMeter with 1000 users. Now we are focusing on server, network computer program, or device that processes requests from a client server, from client. You can refer client server architecture also. In the World Wide Web, for example, a web server is a computer that uses the HTTP protocol to send web pages to a client's computer when the client requests them. On a local area network, a print server manages one or more printers and prints files sent to it by client computers. Network servers, which manage network traffic, and file servers, which store and retrieve files for clients, are two more examples of servers. Here you can see categories of systems. Controller node, the system running JMeter GUI, which controls the test. The worker node, the system running JMeter server, which takes commands from GUI and send requests to the target systems. Target, the web server we plan to stress test. Here you can see the controller node. Controller node is connected to worker nodes, and worker nodes are connected to target. As an example, we can consider here JDBC configuration, and you can see here the database URL JDBC colon MySQL colon // this one this is the IP address of the server. This is the server name here, and the 3306 and / cloud. This is CS node here. By selecting JDBC users element, click your right mouse button to get the add menu, and then select add, then config element, then JDBC connection configuration, then select this new element to view its the control panel here. Here variable name here, my database bound to pool. This needs to uniquely identify the configuration. It is used by JDBC sampler to identify the configuration to be used. Here you can see a database URL JDBC colon MySQL colon // here. This can be IP address, IP of the server, and then here colon 3306 follows as cloud, and JDBC driver class com.mysql.jdbc.driver, username and password. The username of the database, and password here, password for the username. JMeter creates a database connection pool with the configuration settings as specified in the control panel. The pool is refers to in the JDBC request in the variable name field. Several different JDBC configuration elements can be used, but they must have unique names. Every JDBC request must refer to a JDBC configuration pool. More than one JDBC request can refer to the same pool. As an exception example, we can consider this exception occurred in the environment J2STK 1.3.1.03 and Solaris 8. Java.rmi.server exception, remote exception occurred in server thread. Nested exception is java.rmi.unmarshal exception. Error, unmarshalling arguments. Nested exception is java.lang.class.not.found exception. org.apache.jmeter.engine.remote JMeter engine implementation _ stub. Java.rmi. Unmarshal exception, error unmarshalling argument. Nested exception is java.lang. Class class not found exception. org.apache.jmeter.engine.remote JMeter engine impl _stub, and java.lang.class not found exception. org.apache.jmeter engine.remote JMeter engine impl _stub at and etc. As an error example, we can consider this error occurred when JMeter is running with non-GUI mode with JMeter, then -n, then -t, script.jmx -r, slave machine IP -l log.jtl. Error in rconfigure method, java.rmi.server exception. Remote exception occurred in server thread. Nested exception is java.rmi.unmarshal exception, error unmarshalling argument. Nested exception is java.lang.class.found exception. kg.apc.jmeter.threads.ultimate thread group, no security manager, RMI class loader disabled. Now we are focusing on server response. As an example, we can consider this assertion control panel with a pattern. The response assertion control panel lets you add pattern strings to be compared against various fields of the request or response. Pattern strings are contains and matches. These are Perl style regular expressions. Equals and substring. These are plain text and case sensitive. You can also choose whether the strings will be expected to match the entire string, entire response, or if the response is only expected to contain the pattern. You can attach multiple assertions to any controller for additional flexibility. Note that the pattern string should not include enclosing delimiters. That is, use price semicolon backward slash d plus, not / price colon backward slash d plus / by default, pattern is in multi-line mode, which means that the dot meta character does not match new line. In multi-line mode, caret and $ match the start and end or any line anywhere within the string, not just start and end of the entire string. Note that backward / s does not match new line. The case is also significant. Here you can see attribute or parameter name, descriptive name for this element that is shown in the tree. You can see applied to attribute. This is for use with samples or samplers that can generate subsamples. For example, HTTP sampler with embedded resources, mail reader or samples generated by the transaction controller. Main samples only applies to the main sample. Subsamples only applies to the subsamples. Main and subsamples applies to both. JMeter variable name to use. Assertion is to be applied to the content of the named variable. This attribute is required attribute, and here you can see a field to test. Instruct JMeter which field of the request or response to test. Test response, the response text from the server, that is the body excluding any HTTP headers. Response code, that is for example 200. Response message, for example OK. Response headers, including set cookie headers if any. URL sampled, and document text, the extract from various type of documents via Apache Tika. Ignore status. Instruct JMeter to set status to success initially. And here ignore initially. The overall success of the sample is determined by combining the result of the assertion with the existing response status. When ignore status checkbox is selected, the response status is forced to successful before evaluating the assertion. HTTP responses with statuses in the 4xs and 5xs ranges are normally regarded as unsuccessful. The ignore status checkbox can be used to set the status successful before perform further checks. Note that this will have the effect of clearing any previous assertion failures, so that make sure that this is only set on the first assertion. Fail to test attribute is a required parameter, and ignore status attributes also required parameter. Now here you can see pattern matching rules attribute indicates how the text being tested is checked against the pattern. Contains true if the text contains the regular expression pattern. Matches true if the whole text matches the regular expression pattern. Equals true if the whole text equal the pattern string, case sensitive. Substring true if the text contain the pattern string, case sensitive. Equals and substring patterns are plain strings, not regular expressions. Not may also be selected to invert the result of the check or apply each assertion in or combination. If one pattern to test matches, assertion will be okay instead of and all patterns all patterns must match so that assertion is okay. This pattern matching rules attributes is a required parameter. Patterns to test attribute, a list of patterns to be tested. Each pattern is tested separately. If a pattern fails, then further patterns are not checked. There is no difference between setting up one assertion with multiple patterns and setting up multiple assertions with one pattern each, assuming other options are the same. However, when ignore status checkbox is selected, this has the effect of cancelling any previous patterns. Effect of cancelling any previous assertion failures. So make sure that the ignore status checkbox is only used in the first assertion. Pattern to test attribute is a required parameter. As an example, as an error example, we can consider this result: assertion error false, assertion failure true, assertion failure message, test failed, test expected not to contain / invalid username or password. Here, by looking at the HTTP response, we can see that actually this is a 200 code. This is a response from screen with to enter username and password. In the body you can see here invalid username and password, sign-on failed. So based on the default validation, this will be considered okay, and the script will continue even if you are configured to stop on an error. And this will lead to errors at some point because you are not logged in. So, and they will be more difficult to understand since they occur later on. Well, assertions allow you to fail this step so that you quickly understand where the problem comes from. In this situation, we could check that we do not have an invalid logging message. Now we are focusing on JMeter saves all responses. JMeter saves all responses. As an example, we can consider this. These properties in here in jmeter.properties file. This one indicates how to set properties to get vertical bar delimited format that will output results like this. This is the result, and the corresponding jmeter.properties that need to be set are shown here. The one oddity in this example is that output underscore format is set to CSV, which typically indicates a comma separated values. However, the default delimiter was set to be a vertical bar instead of comma, so the CSV tag is misnomer in this case. Think of CSV as meaning character separated values. Here jmeter.save service.output underscore format. This section helps to determine how result will be saved. The commented out values are the defaults. Legitimate values XML, CSV, DB. The only XML and CSV are currently supported, default to CSV. Here jmeter.save service.assertion underscore result underscore failure underscore message. True when field should be saved, false otherwise. Assertion underscore result underscore failure underscore message only affect CSV output, default to true. Here jmeter save.save JMeter save, JMeter saved, JMeter.save service default underscore delimiter for use with comma separated value CSV files or other formats where the fields values are separated by specified delimiters. Default to comma. For tab, one can use /t. As an example, here you can see a screenshot of control panel of sample result save configuration. Listeners can be configured to save different items to the result log files JTL by using config popup as shown here. Items with CSV after the name only apply to the CSV format. Items with XML after only apply to the XML format. CSV format cannot currently be used to save any items that include line breaks. Here you can see the configure button. Here you can see this figure shows an example of result file configuration panel. Here the file name, the name of the file containing sample results, the file name can be specified using either a relative or an absolute path name. Relative paths are solved relative to the current working directory, which defaults to the bin directory. JMeter also supports path relative to the directory containing the current test plan JMX file if the path name begins with title / or whenever or whatever is in the jmeter.save.saveservice.base _ prefix JMeter property, then the path is assumed to be relative to the JMX file location. Browse, the file browse button. Errors, file browse, select this to write read only result with errors, this attribute, and success attribute, select this to write read only result with errors. If neither errors nor success is selected, then all results are processed. You can see the configure button here. As an example, we can consider this one, save responses to a file for error logging. Here this file is saved as myservices _1832 _myprofile 26.unknown. Now we are considering JMeter collects data to manipulate statistical information. JMeter collects data to manipulate statistical information. Here you can see a screenshot of control panel of graph results. Graph results must not be used during load test, as it consumes a lot of resources, memory and CPU. Use it only for either functional testing or during test plan, debugging and validation. here the listener graph results. The graph results listener generates a simple graph that plots all sample times. Along the bottom of the graph, the current sample in black, the current average of all samples, blue, the current standard deviation, red, and the current throughput rate, green, are displayed in milliseconds. The throughput number represents the actual number of requests per minute the server handle. This calculation includes any delays you added to your test and JMeter's own internal processing time. The advantage of doing the calculation like this is that this number represents something real. Your server in fact handle that many requests per minute, and you can increase the number of threads and or decrease the delays to discover your server's maximum throughput. Whereas if you made calculations that factored out delays and JMeter's processing, it would be unclear that you could conclude from that number. Here data plot the actual data values, average plot the average, median plot the median, deviation plot the standard deviation, a measure of variation, throughput plot the number of samples per unit of time. These individual figures at the bottom of this display are current values. The latest sample is the current lapse sample time shown on the graph as data. The value displayed on the top left of the graph is the max of 90th percentile of response time. As an error example, we can consider this error occurred while simulating 50 concurrent users through JMeter in an environment with graph results in JMeter. JMeter.thread.JMeter thread test failed. Java.lang. Out of memory error. We are now focusing on end process. As an example, we can consider command stop control dot. Stop command available from the menu. Stop control dot. Stop the threads immediately if possible. Many samplers are interruptible, which means that active samples can be terminated early. The stop command will check that all threads have stopped within the default timeout, which is 5000 millisecond equal 5 seconds. This can be changed during the JMeter property JMeter engine.threadstop.wait. If the threads have not stopped, then a message is displayed. The stop command then can be retried, but if it fails, then it is necessary to exit JMeter to clean up. As an example 2, we can consider shutdown command shutdown control comma stop shutdown command available from the menu. Shutdown control comma request the threads to stop at the end of any current work. Will not interrupt any active samples. The model shutdown dialog box will remain active until all threads have stopped. If shutdown is taking too long, close the shutdown dialog box and select run, stop, or just press Ctrl plus dot. When running the JMeter in CLI mode, there is no menu and JMeter does not react keystrokes such as Ctrl dot. So JMeter CLI mode will listen for commands on the specific port, default 4445. You can also see JMeter engine.none GUI.port. JMeter supports automatic choice of an alternate port if the default port is being used, for example, by another JMeter instance. In this case, JMeter will try the next higher port, continuing until it reaches the JMeter property JMeter engine.none.GUI.maxPort, which default to 4455. If max port is less than or equal to port scanning will not take place. The chosen port is displayed in console window. The commands currently supported shutdown, grateful shutdown, stop test now, immediate shutdown. These commands can be sent by using shutdown.cmd.sh or .sh or stop test in .cmd or .sh script respectively. The scripts are to be found in the JMeter bin directory. The commands will only be accepted if the script is run from the same host. As an exception example, we can consider JMeter stop test now exception. Class JMeter stop test now exception. This exception is for use by functions etc. to signal a stop test now condition where there is no access to the normal stop method. Stop test now means interrupting current running samplers, which will mark them as failed. This class is in the package org.apache.jopen.util. As an error example, we can consider this error: JMeter kills without this case occurred. JMeter killed without any error notification within Amazon instance. Now we are focusing on get report. Get report. A report is a document that presents information in an organized format for a specific audience and purpose. Although summaries of reports may be delivered orally, complete reports are almost always in the form of written documents. As an example, we can consider this one report providing metrics. This is generated through dashboard generator. The dashboard generator is a modular extension of JMeter. Its default behavior is to read and process samples from CSV files to generate HTML files containing graph views. It can generate the report at the end of load test or on demand. Here application performance index table that computes for every transaction in the APDX based on configuration values. For tolerated and satisfied thresholds. Here request summary graph showing the success and failed requests. Here transaction control sample results are not taken into account percentage. Here you can see a generation from an existing sample CSV log file dashboard generator. The dashboard generator is a module extension of JMeter. Its default behavior is to read and process samples from CSV files to generate HTML files containing graph views. It can generate the report at the end of load test or on demand. As example 2, we can consider this command. This is generation after load test. Here -n run JMeter in non-GUI mode. Here -t the JMeter test.jmx file to run. -t capital last will load last used file. -l and the argument the file to log samples to. -e generate report dashboard after load test. -o report output folder. Here you can see HTML report dialog menu. With the dashboard generator. You can generate HTML report using menu item tools, then generate HTML report. Here the result file CSV or JTL, the CSV output of a test run. This is a required parameter, and the attribute user.properties file. The user.properties file used to run the load test. This is a required parameter. And output directory, the directory where you want the report to be created must be empty. And if no output directory is defined, the controller will use JMeter home /bin /report-output. You then only have to click the generate report button and wait for an information dialog to appear. If the report generation takes more than 2 minutes, adjust the property generate underscore report underscore UI dot generation underscore timeout. As an exception example, we can consider this one. The class generation exception. The class generation exception provides an exception when report generation fails. This is in package org.apache.jmeter.report.dashboard. Error generating the report org.apache.jmeter.report.dashboard.generation exception cannot assign jmeter.report generator.apd ex underscore satisfied underscore threshold to property set underscore satisfied underscore threshold map dash set satisfied threshold. Skip it facing same error after setting the threshold as well. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for watching it.